was supposed to give you the definition of beat, and there came out maybe 30 or 40 different variations, and I thought of, well, who would have the best definition of beat, or the beat generation? Would be possibly a very close friend of Jack Kerouac, who made the statement to him many moons ago. What it meant to him was to beat your socks off. It was, you were downtrodden. It was that was it. You were at the lowest of the low, and that was quoted by Herbert Hunk. So, anyways, that to me is the definition of beat, but other people have their own versions. I'm going to talk a little bit about his from his birth to early adulthood. He was born Jean Louise de Kerouac on the March 12th, 1922, in Lowell, Massachusetts, to two French-Canadian parents. His father was Leo, and he was born to potato farmers. And his mother was Gabrielle Levesque, and she was born to merchant owners. Anyways, they sought refuge in Massachusetts, as most did, and they were both from St. Herbert in Quebec. And so anyways, the early part of his life, there's really very little written about. But I guess his most defining moment was in 1926 when his brother Gerard dies from rheumatic fever at the age of 9 years old. And I think this was Jack's poetic foundation. This is what affected him the most. And it also affected both of his parents much differently. They were very avid Catholics previous to 1926. And his father, Leo, turned inward, became angry, and he basically threw his faith out when his son passed, and became, I would say, agnostic to a particular point. His mother, on the other hand, her faith was deepened. And also, this drew his mother closer and closer to Jack. So, May 17th, 1928, he had his first sacrament of confession. And these are some quotes from him, from Jack himself, and from a couple of friends of his who were members of the congregation that he attended in Lowell. For penance, he was told to say his rosary, during which he heard God tell him that he was a good soul and that he would, in his life, die in pain and horror. But in the end, he would have salvation. This is an experience that he had. And this kind of experience extended throughout his entire life. Having visions or hearing things. Sounds a bit crazy to me. Just my opinion. Anyways, this experience and his dying brothers, and also the vision of his dying brother, and his visions of the Virgin Mary, and these fawning nuns where he was at school, he was convinced that he was a saint. So anyways, in 1930, he went to Boston to the Museum of Fine Arts, and they had a small installation of Dada pieces. And I really think this pushed him as a writer into a whole new form. I mean, think about this: seeing works of art such as toilets on a stand being works of art. I mean, it's a phenomenal thing. And this is when he also begins to journal and create some very short writings. So in 1936, he enters Lowell High School, plays All-American football, and also excels at all other sports that he touches and he gets his hands on. And he becomes a running back. In 1939, he earned a scholarship to Boston College, Notre Dame, and Columbia. And, of course, you can't go to all three, so he chose one, and he chose Columbia. But he had to go to Horace Mann to matriculate and get his requisites so he could enter Columbia. Anyhow, 1936, he starts to write atop on the Underwood early stories and other writings, and he begins to letter and journal, which eventually become his selected letters that are eventually published in 2000. In 1940, he enters Columbia University, and he cracks his tibia. Anyways, he also writes for the Columbia Daily Spectator, which is the LDS, as a sports editor. Here, he meets Mark Van Dorn, who becomes his professor, his lifeline, and John Allen Smith, who eventually becomes John Berryman, who studied also under Mark Van Dorn. Now remember, John Berryman had just graduated the year before from Columbia. Anyhow, he joins a fraternity, Phi Gamma Delta, and in 1941 he becomes best player. And he moves in with his girlfriend, Edie Parker, in New York. This is where his life changes. Edie Parker came from a fairly affluent family in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and was related, who was a niece to Thomas Smith Parker, who was, I guess, a New York publicist. Anyhow, about 42, late 41, he drops out of Columbia. He attends the New School. And this is where he meets the people that he will associate for the rest of his life. He meets Allen Ginsberg, Neil Cassidy, John Holmes, Herbert Hunt, William S. Burroughs, Lucian Carr, Abe Green, and Joan Vollmer, who eventually is William S. Burroughs' wife. Joan was roommates with Edie Parker. And anyways, that's where I'm going to end it for now. And I'd like to have Dan come up.
To John, this dream's where you belong. Your golden journey